Giulia Gartner, welcome to the Creative Get podcast. It's good to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
I want to start off with a bit of a positive kind of reflection question. What is something, looking at your life right now, your career, maybe just where you are, what is the one thing, if you could think of, you're most proud of where you are right now?
That's a good question. I think over the last couple of years, I feel like I reflected a lot on my journey of like where I have become. And I think as someone who overthinks a lot and has a lot of anxiety and social anxiety and all those things that add a lot of unnecessary stress to my life, I feel like I'm finally at a place where I wouldn't say I've overcome it, but I have a much more positive outlook on life and a more positive attitude. Like, obviously, it's not easy to have that every single day, but it's my focus right now to really shift towards that. And I feel like I can really notice it in the last few months, like how much impact that had or has on my life, you know? So, I would say I'm really proud of that because I feel like it's been such a long journey and a long period of time as well in my life that was very sad and dark and difficult. And it just feels like the weight has finally lifted and it just feels, like I'm not saying I'm going through life more like everything's easy, but it just, with that mindset, it feels like it can be. And I think that's a good step in the right direction.
I love that. I think in this season of my life, I think I'm struggling a little bit more with the anxiety type of thing. I go through waves, and I I think sometimes I wish it would just like disappear one day, like just go away forever. But I know it's not. And as you say that you're kind of, you're feeling like you might have crossed that bridge, or like you're feeling better. What are some things that maybe you did to kind of overcome that? Like things that you changed about your maybe daily structure, your mentality, the way you thought, to help you overcome certain things like this? Because I think it's really prevalent for creatives now.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm sorry to hear that you're also struggling with that. And like, I can like totally relate. And it does come in waves. And one thing that I've found that helped me a lot is just to do activities or things that help me to get out of my head. And, whether that is hiking a mountain or skiing a mountain or, having a conversation with a friend and really getting lost, or smiling at my camera screen because the scene that I'm, recording is just so beautiful and everything's coming together perfectly. And it's those moments that really force you to be in the present moment. And there's no room to like overthink about something stupid that you said or how you acted on something, and everything just, the noise becomes so quiet and it's just you enjoying the moment. And I feel like I really strive for those quote unquote more simpler moments and moving my body a lot. Like I love running and hiking, and I picked up trail running this summer and I really enjoyed that. And then now in the winter season, I'm looking forward to skiing and backcountry skiing and ski touring and all those things. So yeah, that's what helps me a lot.
I love that. Essentially just getting out of your own way and just going to do things, getting your body moving.
Exactly.
I love that. Do you think there's a correlation between finding peace and being content?
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. I think for me, being content is something that is more momentary. Like, for example, if I finish a job or I'm done with an edit or whatever, and I'm really proud of it, it's like I'm like content with what I have. And it's like I'm, like maybe at the beginning, it's like I'm really excited about everything, and then it kind of slowly fades away. But I think peace is something that I strive for to always kind of have. And it's not really something that I get when I'm like getting hired for a big job or whatever. I don't really think that that's peace that I get, but peace is more just, with what we talked about earlier, those little moments where you're
Mm.
just really enjoying the moment. And yeah.
Do you think where you grew up in the Dolomites, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
First off, what is that like growing up there?
It's honestly one of the biggest privileges that
Mm.
I have. And I think as a kid, you look at these mountains when you're going to school, and it's like, they're there, but it's not like you look at them and you're like, wow, they're so beautiful,
You
whatever.
think you
Like,
took it for granted?
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Mm.
And I think, I've always been a very creative kid that loved everything that's visually and everything that evokes a feeling. So for me, I've been always drawn to those things, like whether it's, listening to a good song or watching a good movie, and there's this scene that just grasps you and you're just on the edge of your seat. And like those things where it's like you go into a situation with one emotion, and then there's this sudden change of emotion and you feel completely different. And I also love that, like when I look at photographs that have that, where you just feel something, and I really strive to create for something like that.
Mm.
But yeah, going back to the Dolomites, I think I only really started to appreciating where I grew up once I left, and once I started, taking photography more seriously and traveling around the world. And then I felt like I've always been in search for something, and I never really knew what that was
Mm.
until eventually I, spent more time back home in the Dolomites with, the pandemic and everything. And I realized, like, I've been traveling to all these beautiful places, and I have, I'm biased, but I have the most beautiful place right at my doorstep. So yeah, I think I've also started traveling, like traveling less and being more intentional when I travel, and just
Mm.
enjoying really the time at home.
I love that. Do you think that where you grew up allowed for an ambition for creativity? Like, what was your upbringing like to be able to pursue something in a creative field?
Hmm. So I think I have to give kudos to my parents. I think they did a really good job raising me and my siblings, because we grew up in a household where we never really had, financial struggles. My parents worked a lot, and really to give us like the best life possible. And I think one thing that I really value is experiences. And I think it's really my parents that have instilled this idea into me, because I feel like they've always told us, like my siblings and I, that experiences are more valuable and more important than material things. And honestly, I'm so grateful to have that mindset, because I feel like you can really learn so much about yourself and about life through an experience, rather than, buying a new camera or whatever. It's like once you know how to use the camera, and like your way around the camera, blindly, like that's the moment when you actually know how to use the camera, right?
Mm.
So yeah, I think it's honestly, yeah, my parents really that built this safety net kind of for me to just dive headfirst into this career.
Mm.
So yeah.
Do you remember a particular moment in time where you recognized that photography or filmmaking was what you wanted to pursue? And like when you realized that, what did you feel internally that made you decide like, oh, this something about this feels right to me?
Hmm. Well, I can think of a lot of moments there, um, because yeah, I think I've always just been drawn to things that are creative,
Mm.
and just everything that's visual. And yeah, I never really imagined that it is possible for me to have a career in photography. But it's so difficult to pinpoint a moment, because I feel like the more I got into it, the more I loved it and the more I wanted to pursue it. So I wouldn't really say there is one moment. I think it's just like an accumulation of so many moments and so many experiences that, just I just wanted to keep going. So
I love that. Did you go to school for film or photo at all?
no, I went to a like art high school.
Oh, okay.
So
In
there's
Italy?
in Italy, yeah.
Okay.
So the focus is really on the like art in general. So you learn everything from painting to art history to graphic design, and there's all these different subjects that you learn. And I'm really grateful that I have that foundation, because I learned so much about composition and color theory from learning about painters from the 1800s or whatever, or even back to more ancient times. Like there's so much knowledge that you can learn and apply to your craft today. So I think that was really valuable.
I love that you could find inspiration in art from centuries ago. Are there also modern people that you find inspiration from besides paintings or photography? What else do you find inspiration in?
I think music is a huge thing. I listen to so much music and I just love it. It's a like daily companion for me, and like whether it's more instrumental stuff or more popular music, like I wouldn't really say there's one genre or whatever that I like. There's so many different things. And yeah, I think music is a big one, and lately a lot like having conversations with people and just telling stories and hearing other people's stories. I've been really diving deeper now into storytelling, like in general. And I've just found so many interesting things about storytelling, where it's not just about like telling a fictional story, or whatever. It's like it goes so much deeper. You can apply it to so many different things, from like business aspects to your own personal story, your own personal life, or so that's really what I'm striving for at the moment, is to become a better storyteller, like not just with my photography or my filmmaking, like really as a person, because I feel like I've lived a lot of incredible experiences because of photography and because of my job. And sometimes I struggle to verbalize exactly like how amazing those moments were. And I think being able to become a better storyteller, that will just help me amplify talking about those things.
Well, do you think that to become the best storyteller, you have to live outside of your comfort zone? You have to experience things that you're uncomfortable with. You have to meet people that you wouldn't necessarily, be around in your home circle. Do you think you have to kind of just like expand yourself beyond what you could think of to become the best storyteller?
Yeah, it's a tricky question, but I do believe that if you have the courage to do things that scare you, there will always be some kind of positive outcome from that. Like even if the experience totally sucked and like your worst nightmares, like come alive or whatever, at the end, at least you never want to do that thing again, right?
There's
Or
definitely some
maybe
learning lesson from it.
exactly. So I try to view my life through the lens of lessons, and it's always easier to say that when you look back at your life. You're like, oh yeah, that was, of course I did that, and like there was this lesson or whatever. But often in the moment, I'm still terrified sometimes of doing things. And sometimes I catch myself of being, like saying no to things and thinking about them a few months later and being like, I should have said yes to that. And so, but there will be other moments and opportunities that will terrify me. So, yeah.
I love what you said about like looking back in hindsight about, moments where they maybe scared you and then you looked at what came of it, or moments where you didn't think anything was going to come of something, and then you met a friend, for example. I'm curious about people, especially creatives, risk tolerance. Do you think as you started your career to where you are now, your risk tolerance has increased? Like you're more willing to take a risk because of your past experiences?
Honestly, I think it was the other way around for me.
Oh, interesting.
Like when I finished high school, I didn't really know like what direction I was going to take now. And, in the back of my head, like I already started taking photos and stuff like that and, being creative. But in the back of my head, I was like, oh, I'm going to go, to university and then study photography or something creative. But then with me like being more and more interested with photography, and also starting to post a lot of those photos that I took on Instagram, and especially meeting a lot of people that are in the field, and I saw them, being like traveling the world and making a living through photography and posting photos online. I was like, this is interesting, but I never really thought like this is exactly where I want to go.
Mm.
And then I took a trip to New Zealand completely by myself. And this was the first time I did a trip overseas where it was just me and myself and my camera pretty
Wow.
much. And, I I remember a lot of people asking me like, aren't you scared to like go? And I was just like, no, I really want to go. Like something is calling me to go there. And honestly, it was just the best experience ever, because I feel like I really learned how to be independent, and yeah, just how to travel solo and
Yeah.
learn more about myself. And like, I was really, I would say, naive in a way. But I feel like
Which isn't
I've
a bad
learned,
thing.
yeah, which I'm so glad that I had that experience,
Mm.
because yeah, that was New Zealand is just one of the most beautiful countries, and I'll never forget that time that I spent there.
I love that. Besides the idea of, learning to become independent, could you recall any like challenges you faced during that trip and any other lessons that you took away? It could be even, learning how to photograph things better or just, again, being on your own, some things that you learned and things that you faced as in terms of challenges.
I mean, there's a lot of things. Um, so when I was in New Zealand, I was living out of a van, and I was completely by myself, as I said. And I did meet up with a bunch of people, but there was like, let's say 60% of the time, or maybe 75% of the time, I was by myself, just driving up and down New Zealand and just taking photos and hiking mountains. And it was amazing. But there was definitely some moments where I felt lonely, and I, kind of wish there was somebody there to share these moments with. But then on one side, I kind of had that with sharing it on Instagram and being like,
Mm.
like this is what I'm doing today, and like this is my breakfast or whatever. And I really enjoyed that. And I remember really trying to live my life day by day. And I think another thing that comes to mind is I really, really wanted to make this grandiose video about my New Zealand trip. And I just kept putting it off, or I don't know what it is, but I think I just prioritized photography more, I guess. And yeah, I guess I learned that if you want to make a video, then you really have to commit to it and not
Yeah.
just be like, I'm going to film just one clip right here and then the next one in the next few weeks somewhere else, and then trying to match them up. It's like, it's difficult. So yeah.
Mm. When you got home from that trip, did it inform how you want to navigate your future? Um, i- in pursuing
Mm.
photography or film?
I think after that trip, I felt maybe even more lost than when I
Mm.
left too, because it was like, wow, this experience was so amazing, and I want to keep doing that, but I need to find a way to, really make a living out of this, for it to really work. And like obviously traveling the world like costs a lot of money, and I don't want to eat peanut butter sandwiches every single day, you know. So yeah, I think I was pretty lost after that trip. But I remember just having good people around me that I could talk to, and people that I've met because I live in the Dolomites, and a lot of photographers came to visit to, you know, take photos here. And I always saw that as an opportunity to meet up with them and like steal all their secrets and apply them to my life. And
Perfect.
so, yeah.
Yeah, that's
so,
smart.
Yeah. So there were a few people that I reached out to, and I was like, you know, I really want to make this work. And like, it was just really nice to get that feedback from them, of them being like, you know, your work is really great. You just have to like be consistent and keep pushing, because you're going to get somewhere. Just, you know, be persistent. And I think I'm just so glad I had those people around me to push me, because it was difficult to, you know, also learn about the whole business side of things and like how to navigate a career when you have no idea what you're doing, you know, you're trying to figure it out. And like, it's just, yeah, it's just so nice to have someone you can rely on or ask questions, even about like, how much should I charge for this, you know?
Right.
Like that's so valuable. And I'm just so grateful for, you know, having those people in my life.
When you were starting your photography business, I think this could resonate with a lot of people that listen to this, that want to pursue something full time, like photography or filmmaking, but you know, might be working a part-time job, or maybe don't have the means to be able to do it full time yet. What were some of the steps that you took in order to kind of start getting paid? You got your first job. Like, what were some of those steps for you to help you start becoming a full-time creator?
Wow, I think there's so many things that kind of stack on top of each other to get to that point. I think, first of all, I was very consistent with what I was posting, and I'm definitely not as consistent as I was back then. Like, I really posted like probably every single day for 3 years in a row, and I honestly don't know how I did that, but I was just so
That's
passionate.
insanely impressive.
Yeah, I was just so passionate about what I was doing. And
Do you think, if I could interrupt real quick, do you
yeah,
think like, was that a mentality of, I want to just share things, like I just want to put myself out there as much as possible? Do you think that you ever sacrificed quality over quantity, or do you feel that every post upheld a certain quality that you were proud of?
oh yeah, I think I was really hard on myself for the quality that I wanted to achieve. And like, that was really, really important. Like, I would spend hours to just find the perfect photo to fit in the feed, you know, like things like that.
Right. The what's it?
For the grid.
The
Yeah.
grid, exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, I spent hours to, you know, finding the right colors. And like, I'm someone who is obsessed with colors, and I just love when everything matches up and looks aesthetically. Like, still today I do it. And like, some of my friends now they're like, oh, like no one cares about the grid anymore. And I'm like, yes, but I care.
I care still, personally. Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, so wait, I got lost. I lost my trail of thought.
That's okay. It's essentially just like trying to figure out how to, you know, how you were able to start to pursue this as a career.
So yeah, the consistent posting. And I think from the consistent posting, I needed to consistently go outside and take photos and like be creative and like meet people and stuff like that. And like from that, I think automatically you just get better at what you're doing, because the repetition is so high that like it's inevitable that, you know, you're gonna see progress and you're gonna learn so much. And yeah, so I think really just doing it as much as you can, like even if it's, you know, just going for a sunset shoot. Like I did that so many times, like just going outside for a sunset shoot, and then I would always be surprised by how much I actually would come back with, because I was like, oh yeah, the light's not looking amazing, but I'm gonna go anyway. And I feel like whenever you decide to, just go, I always feel like nature just rewards you for the courage that you're having to go. Or I don't know how it works and whatever, but it's like, obviously there are days where, you have a whiteout or it's raining or whatever. And you can still say, well, at least I showed up, So yeah, I think the consistency in, sharing your work online, and the consistency in just showing up for yourself, because you say that you want to do this, then you have to, I guess, prove to yourself that you really want to do this.
Mm.
And for me, it was never really a thought of like, do I want this? Do I not want this? Like, I skipped a lot of days of school just to go photograph, and I wouldn't recommend this, but for me, it was like, of course I'm going to do this. And it brought me a lot of joy, for sure.
I love that. Did you ever find you were a little insecure about the work that you were sharing on Instagram, in particular in the beginning? I know for me, when I started to pursue photography, and I don't know if I wouldn't call myself a filmmaker at that time, a couple years ago, but I was really afraid to share my work. I don't know why. Like, I was proud of the photos I was taking. I noticed that they were getting better and better, but I think I just felt the fear of judgment from people. And eventually I overcame that. But was that something that you felt also, or did you kind of overcome that immediately? You're like, I'm just going to share my work, and that's how it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, like, honestly, at the beginning, I feel like the stakes weren't that high.
Mm.
Like, I started with 0 people watching my work. And as I said earlier, like with the repetition, like I feel like you just improve automatically. And as I improved, I felt like more eyes were on me, and like the more confident I would get just to post. And then I felt like I had to match a kind of quality standard for myself, match that every single time. And I was like more insecure when I was posting things that I felt like weren't at the standard of, the quality that I hold myself to. So I think I was more insecure in that than like sharing the actual work. Like, I always enjoyed sharing, and it was just like something that I would do automatically because I just enjoyed it so much.
I want to talk about something that you talked about, or I think it was part of your like identity for a while, was that the girl in the yellow jacket.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
find that story to be really interesting because I think for a while it sort of was your brand, and then it wasn't. So there had to be a moment where you kind of had to reintroduce yourself to people. I'm curious about that journey for you, to having something that was so widely spread, so popular, to then not having that anymore, and then having to kind of reintroduce yourself to your fan base, your followers, and be like, this is still who I am, but it's not the same anymore.
Yeah, I think that was, I would say, like the first chapter. And like, it's interesting that you brought it up, because nowadays I just don't really think about it that much. But I do have to give a lot of credit to that time, because I feel like there was this part of me that, I was taking photos, but then there was also this girl with the yellow jacket that would appear in the photos, and
Mhm.
people really loved it and people really connected with it. And I never really did it like on purpose, or it never really was my intention to do it. It just kind of happened because I thought a yellow jacket looks really good in every environment, and that's why I'm going to wear it. And eventually I just felt like I grew out of it, and I didn't want to just be the girl that people know because of the yellow jacket. I wanted people to know me as someone who takes great photos and makes great films. And I think that was one of the reasons why I wanted to make this rebrand, to
Mm.
just be Giulia and not the girl with the yellow jacket. And it's funny because sometimes people still come up to me and remind me of it, but I think it really brought me to where I am today. Like without that chapter, I don't think I would be where I am today. So I am still very grateful for that. But yeah, sometimes I do cringe just a little bit.
Hmm. Do you think, was it a challenge to rebrand yourself? Like, was it a challenge to reintroduce yourself to people?
mm, yes and no. I don't think it was like an external challenge. I think it was really a big internal challenge
Mm,
because I feel like I've built this identity online that I was getting myself so familiar with. And at some point, I was like, this is not really me. Like, I want to show more of who I am and show more about things, like, show more, sorry, show more things that I care about. And, like, I don't know, it was, yeah, as I said, like more of a internal struggle to overcome that. And it took a while to just be like, shedding that identity. And it was not just like putting down the yellow jacket, but it was really like growing up and like becoming a new version of myself almost.
absolutely.
And
Mm.
I feel like it's still, work in progress.
I think it's always going to be a work in progress. I think that's like the beauty of being an artist is the ability to continually adapt and grow and change as you go through life. And, you face challenges in your personal life, and that informs you as an artist and a photographer. And I think the moment that you become stagnant or you don't want to grow, I think that might be towards the end of your career where you don't really want to do this anymore personally.
Totally. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
I think something that I find to be interesting about the creative space right now is how much we kind of have to adapt to the brands that we're working with, to the clients, and I'm curious from your perspective how you've had to adapt over the years working with brands as a photographer and filmmaker to still stay relevant and be able to still have your voice in that creative space.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think with like everything with creative processes, like it really is a process to learn how to put your foot down and be like, this is my creative vision and I want to do it like this. But then on the other hand, it's like you have to sometimes compromise because the client is the one who's paying for you to be there, right? So it's like finding that balance of I mean you as a client, you hired me to, do my job and like bring my aesthetic and my work to the table in the way that I want to do it. And I think it's really important for them to, respect that.
Mm,
But yeah, I definitely had some instances in the past where I kind of had to fight over, not necessarily fight, but like, I guess discuss certain situations where even if it was like a minor thing, like I would say I'm a person who's pretty stubborn, and especially when it comes to like my visual work or colors or things like that, I'm like very, very picky, and I know what I like, and sometimes it's difficult to communicate that in a professional way, to be like, no, this is actually the way that it's gonna like perform the best, or just that's gonna appeal the most to the audience.
mm.
um and yeah, it's difficult to.
Do you think that's a skill that you've had to learn is how to communicate and how to, I don't want to necessarily say like the political side of working with brands, but
mm,
like you kind of have to have a certain way of communicating that you're not necessarily taught, but you have to learn how to communicate.
yeah, honestly, you just really learn by messing up a lot of times, I
Mm,
think. And yeah, really, for me, also having conversations with other people where it's like I tell a story about, a situation that I had with a brand, and they're like, oh, the same thing happened to me. And then it's like interesting to know, like, how did you handle it? And like, what, like, yeah, how did it go for you? Whatever. And like, oftentimes it's like very similar outcomes. And it's like maybe sometimes even the same brand, which is funny when that happens.
mm.
Um, But with like everything, it's like a learning experience, and I never really like took any course on how to do business or
Yeah.
whatever. But now I'm very fortunate to have someone in my life who, takes care of that part of like the business part. And it's been very freeing. Like it takes a lot of weight off my shoulders, so I can just focus on doing the creative part, and I don't have to focus on negotiating with the client.
Right.
And I think it's also a really smart move to have someone in between you and the client, because let's say your agent or your producer can be so much more direct with them, where you can just be like
You don't have to
the
be the
holy
bad guy.
chat. Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's something that I'm trying to figure out in my career as a DP. I primarily work as a DP, and I don't have representation yet. I'm not repped by an agent, and I find a internal struggle all the time of having to deal with fighting for my rate all the time with producers, and asking for what I believe I deserve, but also not being the bad guy. So when I walk on set, there's no hard feelings or
Yeah.
things like that. So for me, I feel like I'm in a tough position over this past year in particular of having to do that, and I hope sometime soon I can eventually get repped, because I think that is one of the biggest benefits.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that you're not, because I assumed you were, but yeah.
Not yet, maybe soon.
Yeah. I'm
um,
sure, I'm sure.
Something that you can think about of your own personal work right now, maybe it's something you've done recently, maybe it's something you're doing coming up. What are some challenges that you're facing right now as a creative that you're hoping to overcome?
I think one of the things that I struggle with a lot right now is because I'm kind of in this transitional phase from being a photographer solely to becoming more of a filmmaker. And I feel like I'm very much in the beginning of my filmmaking career, and although I would say I have a lot of experience now, and I'm really proud and like I would say, yeah, content with where my work is going, but it's definitely not where I want it to be. And I think coming from photography, that is such a like selfish activity, I
Mm,
would say, filmmaking is so much more of a community, and like a community effort. Like you have so many more pieces and so many more people that are going to help bring the vision to life. And something that I struggle with a lot is just giving over the creative control, because
sure.
I've been so used to just, doing it by myself. And
Hmm.
like I was the editor and I'm the person who decides like all the things. And now stepping into the filmmaking world, there is like different people that have different things to say about, their department. And I think it's beautiful to have that sense of community, that we're all working together to create something. But I struggle with that sometimes, really, to give over that creative control. Yeah.
I know that you recently just DP'd it was a short like experimental called Pandora.
Yeah.
Um, do you want to pursue DPing, or is that just like a particular position that you fell into for that specific project?
This is something that I'm currently trying to figure out, because on one hand, I do really I do want to have the experience of being a DP and having, like stepping on set and like having my role, operating the camera and like doing that and like just that, and then going home and being like, okay, that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which on one hand sounds great, but on the other hand, I just love the whole creative process, everything
Mm,
from pre-production to post-production. Like I just love being involved in it and like really having a say. And like I yeah, I find it very difficult right now. And I think my goal at the moment is just building my filmmaking portfolio and kind of see where it goes. And I've done a few short films, and I would love to experiment more in like long form, maybe documentary or something like that, and connecting that, with my passion for the outdoors and nature,
Mm,
because I feel like there's so many stories that could be told there, and so many amazing people and athletes that, do something in the outdoors that is, meaningful or has a great impact, or we can go so much deeper into that. Um, so yeah, I'm not really sure where my journey is gonna end up, but I've always been someone who just likes to experiment and kind of see where it goes. So
mm.
that's, I think, I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I want to dive a little bit deeper into the Pandora project, because first it looked beautiful. It
Thank you.
was stunning looking film. How did that come to be? How did you get connected with her?
Yeah. So I did that project with Aya, Alexandra. She's a director from Bulgaria, and we've been connected through Instagram for, I don't know, many, many years now. And we met a few years ago, and we always said that we wanted to make a project together, but it never really, happened. And I remember I was just talking on the phone with her because we were just catching up on life and whatever. And then eventually I was like, do you want to make a project together? Just out of the blue. And then we started talking and brainstorming, and she was like 100% in straight away. And I was like, this is exciting. Like, I want to work with people who are excited to make
Mm,
things, like when they bring 100% and you bring 100%, like that it's going to be good. And yeah, so that was a fully self-funded project, and I see myself more and more making these so-called passion project because I just feel like it's just more fun in a way,
yeah.
because you
Especially
know
with your friends.
yeah, exactly. It's like the stakes are not as high. Like, obviously you want to make something good, but you can still like be maybe less serious in that environment, but still, have fun and make something good. And I just love that. And also not having a brief from a client telling you,
Right.
we really want this, or we really need this, or we have to change the song, or we have to do this. And it's like,
Changing a song is like the worst because it's not that
yes.
simple.
Yeah. Oh yeah, tell me about it. Yeah.
What was one of the biggest challenges you faced on that project?
I think for me it was that everybody on the project, like, we had two models, and it was Aya and me. I just wanted to make sure that everybody had a good time,
Mm,
because I was so excited and passionate about this project. And you always want that everybody is as invested as you. And like, it's difficult also for me because I'm someone who's more introverted, and especially with meeting new people, sometimes it takes a while to break in. And like, obviously there needs to be a mutual effort from, both sides, and it can be difficult sometimes. And yeah, I think that was a big challenge for me, just like, especially in the first few days, being, getting up that energy that everybody's like super excited to be here, when you're at the end, it's just like strangers that meet, and like, okay, now we're, being in front of the camera or whatever. It's also a very vulnerable thing to do as
yes.
a model or actor. So it's it's really a learning process on how to navigate those situations. So I think that was really the biggest struggle for me, because I think you can really feel when you have a connection with the subject that is in front of your lens, like when
Mm,
they trust you as, the person who's operating the camera. I think it really comes through, and like how they act in front of the camera. So
100%. Yes. I
yeah.
think that's a great point. I noticed that a lot of the times in the short films and even the feature that I shot, The director sometimes, depending on the project, is usually either in another room by a monitor or, maybe 15, 20, 30 feet away. And the person that's operating the camera is always the closest person to the actors. So a lot of the time, what I realize is when the director yells cut, the actors will look at you, the DP or the camera operator, for some sort of validation of like,
Mm.
was this good before the director gets in there? And I find that to be a really intimate experience as an operator. And that's why I love it so much, is because you really get a firsthand experience working with actors or people in front of the camera in a very vulnerable position. I find it to be a beautiful job.
Hmm. Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely. Please do.
Um, how I'm curious about how you navigate like the industry as being someone who's like fairly young as a DP, and like do you feel like people don't take you as seriously, or do you feel like that's just something that's in your head?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think I have to come to terms sometimes with where I am in my career and recognize that as much as I would love to be doing these, like $5, $10 million movies, these huge commercials, I also recognize that maybe I don't have the experience or age yet to actually be able to do that the best that I can.
Mm.
And sometimes I sit here and wonder, like, why am I not doing this? Like, how am I not getting this job over here? And I sit back, I'm like, I'm still young. I'm still fresh in this industry. I'm still like an infant. And to be a DP in this industry and be hired by a director, be hired by a producer, it takes a lot of courage for them to hire you. It takes a lot of risk for them to hire you, especially if you're not, close friends with them or you didn't grow up with them. So recognizing that you need to also go through experiences to be able to get to the place where you're shooting really great stuff and really high end stuff takes time. It takes life experience. It does take age, I think. Um, but with the work that I'm doing now, I haven't really found that age has sort of defined me in a certain way. I think partially because how I like to carry myself, how I like to hold a certain standard. I don't come into projects like, oh, I'm only 25, 26 years old. Everyone's older than me. I'm nervous or like, I don't know what I'm doing. I go in knowing what I want. I go in with confidence. I go in understanding that I'm holding a leadership position. I understand that I need to communicate in a certain way. And I think if you go in with these certain ideas and aspects in your head, age doesn't even matter anymore because at the end of the day, you're working with people. And if you're able to communicate and deliver a product in a great way, in an effective way, in a kind, gentle way with confidence, I think that is really one of the most important things for sure.
I love that. Honestly, yeah. That resonates a lot.
Because I think confidence is something that takes time because I think confidence for me changed and it changed my workflow and my ability as a DP in the creative sense, but also in the leadership sense. And I talk about this a little bit, but when I was first starting out, my confidence and my ability as a DP, I didn't feel was very great. So to counteract my lack of confidence, I felt like I needed to control everything. I needed to
Mm.
be the person that says, this specific light is going here, this lens, this camera, this position, everything has to come from my mouth to the delivery. And I think that comes from insecurity and a lack of confidence. To be able to prove to people that you know what you're doing. But as I've gotten, a bit older, I've had some more experiences, I've been shooting for a while, I've recognized that my confidence has now defined me as someone that is way more open and collaborative with people and their ideas, their creative intention moving in, and allowing me to feel that I don't need to have all the answers all the time. And it's okay to say, I don't know. Let's figure it out together rather than kind of spitting out an idea and feeling like I need to say something. And I think I've learned that from, some people like I know Mika Abera, and I
Yeah.
had a conversation with him about this. And he told me something even on the podcast that really resonated with me. He was like on scouts, the producers expect you to have an answer. And some of the best thing that I do is just slow down and say, I don't know yet. Let's figure it out together. And I think that has really helped define my workflow. And as I gain confidence, that's really how I approach cinematography now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see myself in that, in the sense of like wanting to control everything and like wanting to prove to the people that are around you that you know exactly what you're doing. I totally get that. And yeah, I think the only way to overcome that is through experience. And I feel like I'm someone who is very, very intuitive when it comes to filmmaking or photography. And I do know the technical side of things, but honestly, I would probably panic a little bit if I was to go on a huge set and people would just be, operated normally as they would. And I would probably freak out, being in that environment, because I would expect a lot from myself. But I think it's
Mm-hmm.
so nice to hear from you that you can go into these situations with confidence, but also being like, I don't know everything. And I think that's also a skill that you have to learn, to
Yes.
be like, actually, I don't know.
I
And
think that's the beauty of filmmaking. What you said
mm,
before, photography, you said is selfish, but filmmaking is very collaborative and very relationship based. And I think that is the beauty of filmmaking, is going in with a sense of vulnerability, especially as a DP in a leadership position, having a sense of vulnerability and allowing the people that you're working with to feel that and feel comfortable enough to come to you with ideas and their creative thoughts, for them to be involved in the project and not just feel like another tool,
mm,
essentially.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hmm. Do you think that you reflect a lot on the projects that you shoot afterwards? And how does that, if you do, how do you think reflecting makes you better as a creative?
I really feel like the projects where I had like a debrief with the people that were involved, I feel like more like, not like I moved on from the project, but it feels like the process was more complete. Like if you think about like when you're making a film, like there's so much communication in the beginning, right? Before you even shoot, there's so much communication during, there's so much communication, while you're in post production. But then once it's out there, it's like you don't really get the chance to sit down and be like let's debrief and like let's
Mm,
talk over it. And I think that's something that I really want to do with every project that I'm gonna do from now on, just to also get the feedback from like other people of being like, how did you enjoy working with me, and like what did you
yes.
learn, or do you have any tips how I can improve? Because if we do that, then we can hack our way into learning something that might take us maybe 5 years to discover it on our own.
Yes. And I think that's a really important point that you mentioned, and something that I recognized early on as a very valuable tool is working with people and then asking for feedback. Like you said, does age hinder you? Maybe does it define you in a certain way? And the one thing that I notice about my age is that I'm usually one of the youngest people on set. And a lot of the people that I end up hiring, like gaffers, electricians, grips, for example, a lot of the times they're a lot older than me. They're fathers, they're husbands. They've been in this industry for 10 plus years, 15 years. And some of the best knowledge that I've gotten has simply been from rapping on set and texting them, hey, it was really great working with you. Do you have anything that I can improve on in our workflow? Was there something that I could have communicated better? Is there something that I could have allowed you to do better for you to feel like you could have came to me? Or
Mm,
anything like that, I think is super, super important, but it requires you to let your guard down and take feedback, which I think
mm.
is hard for people. Do you think feedback is, do you take feedback well, or did you have to learn to take feedback well?
I definitely have. I still have to learn to take
Mm,
feedback well, but I do appreciate it when people have critical feedback, because everybody loves to hear that they did a great job. But at the end of the day, that's not going to help you,
Yeah.
move forward. Like, I really appreciate it when people just, are honest and be like, actually you could do this better, or you could improve here, or maybe next time don't do this, or
Mm.
and then whether you take their advice or not, like, that's on you. But I really appreciate it when people are open and just say what they think. And yeah.
Mm. Where you are in your life now in your career, how would you define a successful life? What does a successful life look like to you right now?
For me, a successful life is working on enough projects that I feel like I have a creative fulfillment, but not overworking myself where I'm like not enjoying what I'm doing as much as I would if I would just say yes to less projects and really focus on those and really making those my priority, and then having the time off. And this is something that I really had to learn, to take time off
Mm.
and be away from my projects and, go for a run, go for a hike, go for a trip by myself, whatever it is, and really disconnect from creating. Because I think, as someone who's very passionate about what they do, it's difficult to detach yourself from it. Because honestly, if it was for me, I would love to always be working and always, find the next thing to do. But I realized that if you cram in too many things and too many trips and too many jobs into a month or whatever, like into a season of your life, it's just, it all becomes like a blur, and you can't really like absorb what is happening. And I think I learned that through traveling the world and being at different countries for different jobs, and like really cramming everything in and just going from one place to the other. And just that high paced
Yeah.
life where you can't really take in what is happening, and it's all just a blur. And like, sometimes I look back at some photos and I'm like, wow, I was there, but I wasn't really there. You know what I mean? And like,
Mm.
nowadays I feel like I'm so much more present when I do something. And it took me a long time to get there and be like, I can now slow down and enjoy my off time, because it is difficult when you love what you're doing.
Yeah.
Do you find like you struggle with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'd struggle with two different things. One is if I'm super busy and like I'm getting a lot of work and I'm feeling, creatively fulfilled, I I can take some time off, but I never feel like I really am experiencing time off.
Mm.
I'm always thinking about what is coming up next. I'm thinking about how I can create a new podcast episode, a new YouTube video, a new this, a new that, where I interviewed somebody recently, and he's been in this industry as a DP for 30 plus years, and he said he only recently was able to actually take time off, and how valuable that was for him. And I think the reason why I struggle with that in particular is because sometimes I lack gratitude, and I
Mm.
think it's something that I don't take into account as often as I should. And if I were to practice gratitude more and recognize the things that I have just completed, the things that I've just done, it would put me in a better position to then be more present in today's moment. And
Mm.
like in the off day today, the off day tomorrow, because I'm not necessarily thinking about what I have to do coming up in a couple weeks. I think gratitude is something that I really need to put more of an emphasis on in my life.
Mm. Yeah, that honestly takes time to learn.
Yeah.
um and yeah, it's a process. But yeah, I totally understand, like, when you're finishing a project, you're like, okay, like, what's next?
Yeah.
I know how that feels like, and it took a long time for me as well to be like, like, I can enjoy myself now because I just finished this big project and I did a good job. But sometimes still in the back of my mind, there's this voice that is like, okay, so what's next, And
Yeah,
it's like, well, it's it's difficult to deal with that. And I think I don't know if it ever will go away. I don't know.
it's true. I I think you're right. I don't know if it will. And I think the other side of that question of like what's next that I struggle with is like what's next, and there is nothing next. I
Mm.
have nothing coming up. No leads, no one's hitting my phone. And then I could have just had an amazing 2 weeks, like busy, whatever, like feel creatively fulfilled. And then I look at my calendar and it is just empty.
Mm.
And I think that is something that really hurts. And I don't know how to deal with that. And I think I'm figuring that out. But I think that's the nature of this business, is to understand that that is a thing sometimes. But that is something that I find to be really hard, is when there is nothing next.
Yeah, honestly, I struggle with that still. Like, for example, this during August, especially in Italy, like there's nothing going on. Like
Yeah.
nobody's
I
working.
was in Italy in August and there was nothing going on.
Yeah, there's nothing going on. And like in general, I would say like
What's it called?
in
Ferragost or something?
Ferragosto, yeah.
Yeah.
In general, I feel like in our industry, like summers are more chill, like more at least for me, like feel more like everyone's on holiday and everybody's taking it easy. And I was at the end of August, I was really worried because I was like, I haven't received an email in like 5 weeks, 6 weeks, like nothing is happening. And I was so worried. And then suddenly it's the 1st of September and there's just so many things that are coming in. And I was, working until like just a few weeks ago now is just, it was jam packed and there's so many different things that were happening. And really like, I feel like I was on this high and like now coming down from it. I'm like, wow, that happened so quickly and like so many
Yeah.
things happen. And it's always that when it's the most unexpected, like suddenly it just happens and we just have to kind
Mm,
of trust that it's gonna come.
I agree. Do you find that you are patient in your trajectory of your career, or do you find that you're impatient and want to have more at a quicker pace?
Hmm. I used to be much more impatient.
Mm.
But I think because with my photography journey, it happened like not overnight, but it happened pretty quickly. Like in the course of 1 or 2 years, kind of I started from, taking photography seriously and then being able to make a living and then like traveling all over the world. And it was such a fast paced world that I don't feel like now where I'm going more into like the filmmaking world and like trying that out, I'm like, I feel like I don't want that to happen with my filmmaking journey. Like, I don't want it to explode and like get carried away and
Yeah.
like crash because I really want to take my time with it and really enjoy it. Although, like, sometimes it's difficult to have the
Mm,
patience, but I know it's worth it.
yeah. Do you find that you are more interested in pursuing filmmaking over photography at this point?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. I think
Mm,
photography now has become just something that I do on the side that I enjoy, just for myself and documenting my life because I'm just so used to that. But I really find so much more joy now in filmmaking. And I feel like there's so much more to learn in the filmmaking world compared to photography. But I'm really glad that I have this background in photography because I do believe that it makes me a better filmmaker.
right. Do you think it helped shape your visual ability as a DP in terms of composition and using natural light, for example? Have you dabbled into artificial light and actually like crafting and shaping images with various lights, or do you tend to stick to more towards the natural light?
I tend to stick more to the natural light because that's really all I know how to do, I would say. And to be very honest, I have no idea how to light a indoor scene, but it is something that I want to learn. I'm very curious and I love learning. So that's something that I really think will be beneficial, like regardless if I never want to, be on a professional set or whatever. I think it's just a good skill to have.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Mm.
coming up at some point.
Yeah. It's lighting an indoor scene. I mean, just lighting in general was the hardest thing for me to wrap my head around. I think for a while I got so overwhelmed with like how to light something and like seeing how people are creating these images and like, there's 15 lights. And then I think I couldn't grasp the concept of lighting. And then I just slowed myself down and just essentially practiced the fundamentals. And there's a practice that I did that I recommend a lot of people to do when they ask me about lighting is, in your house, most of the time, depending on if you live in the most gorgeous house in the world, but most of the time your house you find to not be super inspirational. Like you don't really want to shoot in your house very often. I find most people. And being able to come in it with a perspective of like, okay, if a director hired me as a DP to shoot an interview in this house, how would I shoot it? How would I light it? So going into looking at your house as a new location and being forced to kind of create something has helped me kind of unlock creative ideas in the beginning and help me understand the fundamentals of lighting. So I would go around my house, fake interviews of myself, and just figure out how to light myself in various different ways in an environment that I see every day, that I don't feel inspired by, but I have to create something. And that to me is a really important practice that I think would really help people when they're learning how to light, is fake interviews or just interview your friends, for example.
I love that. Yeah, I feel like there were definitely a few scenarios where I did set up some cameras in my living room and like had to film something, and I always struggled with like, how do I make this place like look
Exactly.
yeah, like
Look good. Yeah.
yeah, look
And
good.
for me, it's not just lighting. It's like, okay, what if I took a lamp from the living room and put it in my bedroom? What if I closed the blinds or, like little
Yeah.
things that you could mix and match, because most of the time, you're not inspired by where you
Yeah.
live all the time, but how can you use what you have to make it something that is sort of inspirational?
That's actually a really good practical tip to try to figure out, because as you said, it's such a familiar space that you kind of have to take yourself out of the space and be like, okay, like let's just look at it objectively and
Exactly. Yeah.
let's see what we can create. Yeah.
Because most of the time, when you're hired, unless you're doing location scouts, a lot of the times you might not know where you're shooting until you get there. And the skill that you're going to have as a DP in particular is walking into a location for the first time and immediately or within the first couple minutes start thinking about how you're going to create that image. And I think by practicing in an environment that you're so accustomed to, it forces you to think outside of the box. So I think it's a great practice.
Yeah, for sure.
I got last question for you. Where you are today, in this point in your life, this point in your career, sitting across the table from maybe that younger version of you that took that solo trip to New Zealand, what advice would you give that younger version of you?
Worry less, I think. Yeah. Yeah, I think I really wish I could tell my younger version that, because I feel like my life is like, it turned out so amazingly than I could have never planned or imagined that I would be, where I am today. And there was so many times where it was just worrying way too much about little things that didn't matter at all. So yeah, it's a simple thing, but I think it has a really, really big impact.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you, Giulia. Really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thank you.
Where can people find you?
Julie Gartner on all socials, and my website is juliegartner.com.
Amazing. Thank you for taking the time with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you.
All right, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed today's episode. Peace out.